Okay, good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to Culture and Engagement's Financial Wellbeing Webinar Wednesday. I'm Mark Simpson. Today is the last in our programme of 12 webinars, and I'll be delighted to be joined by UCD Pensions Manager Fiona Byrne. Fiona is going to cover off the options for employees who joined the public sector prior to the 1st of January 2013 and who may be able to transfer their pensionable service from their old employer to UCD. If you'd like to ask a question, please do use the Q&A function on Zoom. We are recording this webinar and we'll post it to the Culture and Engagement YouTube channel shortly. So I'm going to hand over to Fiona and I'll come back at the end and we'll hopefully have a few questions. So over to you, Fiona, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome everybody to our session this afternoon regarding transferring service under the pre-2013 pension schemes. I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon to give you as much information as I can over the next 20-25 minutes or so. So hopefully everybody on the call is a member of a pre-2013 pension scheme. So in other words, we shouldn't have anybody on the call who is a member of the single public service pension scheme, which is the scheme from 2013 onwards. So what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of context on pension benefits and the schemes that you might be in before I get stuck into the transfer option. I think if we cover off the basics first, you'll get a better understanding of how the transfer of service would benefit you and how it works. So we're all members of the UCD pension scheme. In terms of us being employees of UCD, that's something that is part of our terms and conditions of employment. Our pension schemes here in UCD are all defined benefit pension schemes, which are the best kind of pension schemes you can have, where the benefit is derived from service and salary. So the higher your service, and the higher your salary, the better the pension benefit that UCD can pay you when you arrive at retirement. This is very different to a defined contribution scheme, which you typically see in the private sector. A defined contribution scheme would be driven by the amount of contributions that have been paid into the scheme, either by the employee or the employer, and how those contributions are then invested. And the value of that pension pot when you arrive at retirement is what will then determine your pension benefit. So you can see that the risk with that type of arrangement would mostly be with the employee, whereas in UCD and across the public service, we're being promised a pension based on the service and the salary. So that is guaranteed to us, and it doesn't really matter to us what is paid in by us or paid in by UCD or how those contributions are invested. Our benefits are not linked to the contributions. So what I've done there is just list out the different types of pension schemes that we have here, and the year that's in the title of the scheme tells you when they became effective from. So we have the 1978 scheme, which is the original scheme, the original pension statute that was set up in UCD. You have a 1985 scheme. You have a 1995 contribute. As I said, we're not covering the single public service pension scheme in this session. So those schemes are all defined benefit. What I suppose the differences between the different schemes would largely be around your PRSI class. So in the 1978 scheme and the 1985 scheme, those scheme members would all be paying class D PRSI, which is the modified PRSI. And that means that they will not qualify for a state pension on top of their UCD pension. Now, there are certain circumstances where they might qualify for partial state pensions, but the assumption is that they don't qualify for a state pension based on their PRSI status currently. The 1995 scheme and the model scheme, then you would have members who are class A contributors in that scheme, and it's assumed that the members of those schemes will qualify for a state pension on top of their UCD pension. So you're going to get a pension from UCD and a pension from the state separately, and that's to do with the fact that you pay a higher PRSI contribution rate. So on a very basic level, the pension scheme is going to give you a pension. That pension is going to be your income in retirement. So you retire from UCD on your 60th birthday, 65th birthday, whatever the chosen retirement date is, and your salary will stop on that day, and then it converts into a pension the next day. And UCD pay our own pension, so it's not outsourced. You'll continue to be kept on the UCD payroll. So the pension is the income, and that's the bit that really you have to think about in terms of retirement planning, and whether that pension and income is going to be suitable for you, and whether you're happy with that level of income, or whether you need to do something to augment it. And that's where our transfer option will come into play, and we can look at how that is going to improve the benefit for you. Gratuity then is the one-off lump sum payable on the day of retirement, and it is once off and currently tax-free up to 200,000. Potentially there could be a deduction from that gratuity called an abatement, and that may be to do with the fact that you have some service which we have counted for you, but you may not have paid contributions on it. And the most typical example of that would be where somebody perhaps joined UCD on a temporary contract initially and didn't become permanent maybe for a couple of years, and therefore have a couple of years of service which was not pensionable at the time, but we do reckon it in the pension calculation at retirement, and therefore we have to charge an abatement for the contributions that weren't paid. So that's what you will expect from the scheme. Now, the calculation of the pension and gratuities is going to be different when you look at the different pension schemes. And again, it goes back to the PRSI class that you're currently in. So if we, when we talk about PRSI contributions, I should have said that all public servants paid modified PRSI if they joined before 1995, and anyone then that started in the public sector after 1995 paid the Class A contribution in the same way as any private sector employee. So that's why we see a split there between pre and post 1995 when it comes to pension calculations. Okay, so what I'm going to just briefly show you is a calculation of somebody who's in a pre-1995 scheme. It's nice and simple. You take a pensionable service, divide it by 80 and multiply it by your final pensionable salary, okay? And the gratuity, the one-off lump sum, is going to be your pensionable service multiplied by 3, divided by 80 by the final pensionable salary. So I put in a little example underneath the formula here to demonstrate how it works. This person has 40 years service, divide that by 80 and multiply by the salary in this example of 50,000, and that gives us a pension of 25,000 per annum. So you can see there the salary was 50,000, and with 40 years service it results in a pension which is equal to half their salary at retirement. Okay. And with the lump sum, then you're going to be taking your service 40 years, multiplying by 3, divided by 18 by the salary 50,000, and in this example that gives us a gratuity of 75,000. So that's one-off payable on the date of retirement. Okay, and just to say to you, 40 years is the maximum that we can count for pension purposes. Okay, so that is the holy grail in terms of what can be reckoned under your pension arrangement. I mentioned the abatement on the previous slide. That would be where you may not have paid contributions on a period of service, and we charge 1% of final salary for each year of the contributions that haven't been paid. Okay, so if we then move on to the post-95 people, a little bit more complicated. It's a two-part formula, and what we're doing here is we're integrating it. We're taking into account the fact that the post-1995 members are going to receive a state pension, and the state pension is currently at a rate of 12,956 per annum. Okay, so what you do is you take a portion of your salary, which is equal to 3 1/3 times the old age contributory pension. So 3 1/3 times this 12,956 figure is your 43187. You're going to take that figure, multiply it by the service, divide it by 200, and that gives you the first part of your pension calculation. And then you're going to take the rest of your salary, which is over 3 1/3 times the old age contributory pension. So in this case, it's our 50,000 less this 43187. We're going to take that figure and multiply it by 40 years and divide it by 80. And that gives us the second part of our pension figure. So the total of those two amounts gives a UCD pension of 12,043. And remember then the state pension would also be payable on top of that. The state pension is paid by the Department of Social Protection, and the UCD pension is paid by UCD. So you will be making an application separately to the Department of Social Protection where they will establish your eligibility for the state pension, and they'll make that payment to you directly. There may be reasons why you don't qualify for a full state pension. You might have had a break in your contributions and so on, but that is a matter for yourself and the Department of Social Protection. Okay, so there are the two bases, I suppose, that we would use for the calculation of your pension if you're a pre-95 person or a post-95 person. However, you do have an online pensions record through ESS. So the same place that you go to look for your payslip, you have a pension record in there that you can access anytime. The record will give you a snapshot of what your retirement benefits are going to be at normal retirement age. And it also has a helpful calculator in there, which helps you to model maybe some scenarios that might be of interest to you. For example, you want to see what your benefits or figures would be at age 60, what they might be at age 67, etc. And all of that is informing you and helping you plan towards your retirement and working out whether you need to do something to augment or improve the pension benefit. So finally, we get to the transfers in bit. So when we talked about the calculation of your pension there, we really focused on the service and we focused on the salary. So if you have previous public sector service where you were employed in a public sector body, civil service department, UCD participates in an Irish public sector transfer network. And that means that we can take service in from any of those public sector, civil service bodies and just add the service on to your record. So we don't exchange money with those other bodies. We don't look for a value. We don't care what level of contributions you paid in. Now, obviously, we want to know that you did pay all of your contributions, but it doesn't matter to us what the other organization has charged you for it. We just we transfer in that service and we add it to your record here in UCD, and we will add it to your record, and it will obviously improve your benefits. Okay, so it can be a long process. You know, what you're doing is you're writing to a previous employer, asking them to verify your service with them. So for take a long time to get it verified. Okay, it may be the case that your previous public sector service may not actually have been pensionable at the time. They may allow you to reckon it now at a particular cost. So in that case, they provide us with the cost, and we can tell you what that cost is, and you can use that then to buy the service and bring it in under UCD. Generally, the cost is very reasonable compared to the benefits that you're going to get in return for the amount that you have paid. And there may even be a potential to get some tax relief on that, which is excellent. In fact, I've never seen a buyback of service, as we call it, to not be good value for money. So even if you think that it's something that you know, a service that wasn't pensionable at the time, it is certainly worth investigating it at this stage to be absolutely sure it can't be bought back or moved into UCD. So it's as simple as that in terms of how it works. The frustrating part or the slow part of it can just be getting the other body to confirm the service to us. Transfers from private sector then, so even though these employers may not be participating in the public sector transfer network, what you can do is take a value from a previous private pension pot, and you can take the value of that pension and use it to buy extra service in the UCD pension scheme, and that's done through notional service purchase. So the transfer value can be taken in, and we can use the notional service rates to work out how much service we can give you in UCD for that amount. So unlike the public sector transfer, it's not knock for knock. It's going to be based on a certain level of rates and costs that are, I suppose, given to us by the Department of Finance. Now, anything you buy under the notional service scheme is added to your record in the same way that regular service would be. And therefore, it filters down all through, your benefits. So you'd see an increase in your pension, you'd see an increase in your gratuity and your spouse's benefits and so on. So we give you a quote for that. Now, this may not be as clear cut as the knock for knock service from the public schemes, in that, you may have to consider whether it is good value for money or not. It is an expensive scheme, under which to buy service. So there could be a little bit more thought that would need to go in to this one, and we would certainly, recommend that you take independent financial advice if you've any doubts about that, or you need help with the decision. We can give you all the information you need, but the decision is ultimately with yourself. We do get asked a lot about transferring from overseas pension arrangements. And again, if that overseas pension arrangement is prepared to transfer to UCD, we can take that value in, and we can look at how much notional service that transfer can actually take. So it may not be possible to transfer from a number of different countries. UK pensions, we do a good bit of those. There's no problem with those coming in generally, but we would see very little coming from outside of the UK. I suppose the next steps then that we would be looking at is what you would need to do. Well, say if you have a public period of service there that you think might be transferable, or even if you're not quite sure and you want to investigate it, then if you send an email to pensions@ucd.ie with all of the information that I have there on screen, the name, contact details of your previous employer, anything that you can give us to make it easy for them to search for your previous record is really what we need from you. It could potentially be going back 20 years ago. It could be pre-computerized records. So anything you can give them in terms of a steer as to your employment may speed up the process. So what was your position when you were working with them? What kind of contract were you on? And anything else you think that might be relevant to them. The private pension pot transfer, we need to know what the current transfer value is. I suppose that's the starting point. We can then give you a quote and you can say, yes, that looks like good value. No, it doesn't. And then we can end the process there if that's the case. But the transfer value is what's going to be important here, and it can, not as long as the public ones, but getting the transfer value can take a little bit of time from a previous administrator or a previous employer. So that's it. I can't believe